Wait a minute. Did I hear the Friday song? It's Friday already? Friday. Everybody's looking forward to the weekend. Party. But before we can get to the weekend, we got to get through the day of Friday, which includes this, another spectacular Bellringer. All right, by now you've taken the midterm exam, and hope you had a whole lot of fun with it. It's not supposed to be fun. Exams aren't supposed to be fun, but they are supposed to help you consolidate your thinking, and designed also to evaluate. And that's the New York State Regents exam is supposed to evaluate every student in the state that takes living environment and how well they've understand the content of living environment. And by design, it's designed to separate students. All right, so keep that in mind. It really is a reading test. And so one of the reasons why I emphasize reading so much is because reading's only going to help you with the test. Big thing is, here, I'll give you some examples from the midterm.
All right. Hey now. Mr. Kovacs class. It's Mr. Kovacs class. You might learn a ton. It's Mr. Kovacs class.
He's interested too.
It's Mr. Kovacs class. And he's super cool. It's Mr. Kovacs class.
Part 2, question 36 was this, all right? A lot of reading in this question. Experiment was carried out to determine the effects of exposure of ultraviolet light onto the growth of bacteria, right? And then it asked you, what was the question asking if you state a hypothesis and then state whether the results they gave you supported the hypothesis. Most of you were able to give me some kind of a hypothesis where that ultraviolet light was going to affect the growth of bacteria, but you have to be specific. You got to say whether it's going to affect it positively or negatively. Okay? And then when you look at the data, you have to be able to interpret this data to tell me what happened. Screened meant they didn't get any ultraviolet light. Unscreened means they were exposed to light, right? So on the screen side, usually, regardless of the time of exposure, they go 20 or some odd colonies. On the unscreened side, when there's no exposure, they grow about the same number of colonies, but as soon as you increase the exposure, you decrease the amount of bacterial colonies, which means ultraviolet negatively affects bacteria growth. Okay? So that's a good example of, I had people who got things backwards or couldn't read really got to slow down and read the question. Here, let's look at this question. Most of you were able to tackle this question fine, but some people, again, you can tell they just didn't read the question. Each body cell contains the same genetic information, so they give you that. And then they're asking you, identify another similarity other than the genetic information. So they're just checking, do you know what human tissue cells have in common, right? Which is just like, do you know what cells are alike? With the exception of genetic information, right? So I had people, I took nucleus because technically there are organisms that don't have nucleuses, right? So since these all have nucleuses, you don't have to actually always put your DNA in nucleus, but I couldn't accept DNA or genetic information, right? So this is a good example of reading the questions, which lots of great examples. Here, you answer that question again. What are a couple things that they have in common? And then finally, I love this question about the elderly man who had to cough, and he was a smoker, and they did an x-ray, and they found there was a pea growing in his lung. And the question is, state whether the pea seedling could have continued to grow and develop in the lung. They're just asking, do you know what plants need to grow? So I could accept any answer that had to do with, no, they wouldn't get any sunlight, wouldn't be able to do photosynthesis, so eventually the pea seedling would stop growing. Okay? I had some people threw in there that he'd get carbon dioxide because there'd be carbon dioxide in the lungs, which was partial, but you had to mention the lack of light and being able to do photosynthesis as being an answer. And this always reminds me of when I was a kid, when I was told that if you swallowed a watermelon seed, you get a watermelon growing in your stomach. Not true. Same issue. Same issue. All right. Let's get down on Friday.